is, right now, it looks like they've backed off their signals, but of course the bad news is they can hit the switch again at any time. But if you go to the website, again, if you just do a search for induction magnetometer, there is an instrument that was donated by the University of Tokyo that shows these signals that are broadcast. Again, there's no congressional oversight. There's nobody babysitting or watching what they're doing with this war machine being run by the U.S. Air Force. If you've had Dr. Nick Begich on your show before, haven't you, Joyce?
Oh, yeah, several times, yes.
He's one of the ones that's really knowledgeable in this. You can do a search. I'm sure there's YouTube videos, and he lives up there in Alaska. But this device is capable of manipulating the weather, causing earthquakes, a whole bunch of patents on various things it can do. But for the past 36 hours or so, it's been transmitting 4 frequencies right off the charts, and a number of people have been concerned that they are preparing to trigger the New Madrid quake that FEMA and DHS and everybody has been telling you on History Channel and PBS is coming, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. The only thing they're not telling you is that they have the ability to cause this themselves. And, of course, they purchased 140 million MREs, meals ready to eat, 140 million blankets, and one story I read said 40 million underwater body bags. You see what they're doing as far as the amount of water that's been dumped in the New Madrid area now heading down to Louisiana. There is a U.S. Navy future map showing a large inland sea from Lake Michigan all the way down to the Gulf. The globalists plan on large amounts of depopulation, murdering people in various countries just as they did in Japan. And again, if you go back to this magnetometer site from March 9th through March 11th, there was a 2.5 hertz frequency sent out, and this does not happen in nature. The signal was generated by a machine, whether it was HAARP in Alaska or another one of the phased array antennas that's out there in the world, because Russia has one called Woodpecker, and there's one in Europe, I believe, and this site doesn't tell you who's doing it. It simply shows you the radio frequency that's out there and gives you an idea of the intensity. But that signal was sent for 2.5 hertz for 55 hours until Japan had their quake, and then they shut it off. So we are very concerned that they're going to do this here in our area. You're close to it as well. Once they get Lake Michigan dumping, all these salt beds wash out from underneath. Again, they've done hydrofracking up and down the New Madrid Gulf to allow the water to get down to those salt beds. The U.S. Army just blew up levees, dumping water into the direct New Madrid fault line zone.
And let me stop you right there. Because I was reading a lot of information from the Army Corps of Engineers, and I found a statement that bothered me tremendously that said, and we don't believe that it will have anything to do, and that is the blowing up the levees. We don't believe that this will have anything to do with the problems with the New Madrid fault line. Now, that to me was a giant back door to drive their 18-wheeler through and say, well, gee, oops, we shouldn't have done that. But that's of concern that they're now saying we don't think it will have anything to do. Perhaps they should have made that decision before they blew those levees. They said that they could hear the sound of the explosions 175 miles away from where they blew them. So this is, particularly significant to those people down there. Why they would just all of a sudden decide to blow some levees right in the area of a fault line that was unstable as it is just beyond me.
And they said they did this to protect a small town of 2,500 people, yet they're trashing 140,000 acres of farmland, which had good wheat and corn on it at a time when food prices are skyrocketing. The rains have kept the farmers from getting their crops in the ground, so food prices are going to continue to skyrocket there. This is all depopulation. HAARP and weather modification is being used against the American people. We used it against Japan. There are factions of the globalists that want depopulation. And they don't care about, us manufacturing taxes or money. That's complete baloney. Those people that say this. They ripped us off for $27 trillion. They don't need us anymore.
Well,
May 16th.
And then yesterday, they had Tammy Dickinson, who's a senior policy advisor at the White House Office of Science and Technology. They released a news release, whitehouse.gov, which is in the email blast. And listen to this. Basically it's saying be prepared for a 9.0 in the new Madrid fault line. Have you seen this at whitehouse.gov?
No.
Yeah, it says be prepared. It says there was one in 1811 that was 7 point whatever, but get ready, there could be one that is 9.0. The figure of 1811 could be dwarfed. Now, this is put out yesterday. Of course, in the event of a magnitude 9 earthquake, and while this exact location, timing, and intensity of earthquakes cannot be predicted, well, they also talk in terms of the West Coast. The West Coast could be a problem. Well, we know what they're leading up to, and all of this activity driven toward having the new Madrid, basically implode, this whole area implode. If it did, if they had a magnitude 9, can you speculate, and I ask you to speculate, because that's what we're doing right now, can you speculate as to how far north and how far south they would feel the damage from this?
Well, again, there's the U.S. Navy future map, and you got to question, why does the U.S. Navy have this? Shows a huge inland sea from Lake Michigan all the way down through Louisiana. I mean, Louisiana is gone according to this future map. I believe the Gulf BP Horizon Gulf oil well is part of this. There's a huge amount of pressure under there. They blew it out. Then they started the fracking up and down. There's a bunch of salt beds under there. This HAARP works like a giant microwave beam on water. Look how much water they're inserting into the area and right at the New Madrid fault line. And then they've been pointing this signal at them. There's 4 frequencies that have been screaming off the chart for the last 36 hours. They brought this thing up to a boil. Now they kind of backed it off a little bit. But I think they're waiting for next week when they get this exercise scheduled. Remember on 9/11 they were doing an exercise of running planes into the building. The CIA did this in Building 7. In 7/7 in London they were doing an exercise of putting bombs in the subways.
Okay, and let me just add, go back to this event though. It looks as though the magnetometer or whatever, the HAARP pressure or blast was stopped at about 0600, 0500 this morning. Is that what you read on this?
Yeah, well, it's not totally stopped. You can still see the signal there. You still see a good signal at about 1.5 and up there at 2.8. They just kind of backed off a little bit. But, I mean, if I was these guys, I'd have sensors where they're targeting. I'd know exactly how this thing is boiling. And, I mean, they're controlling this thing just exactly the way they want to. May 16th, interestingly enough, is the deadline for the raising the debt ceiling as well. There's a lot of financial things coming to bear here.
And it's also going to be the shuttle launch, I think, too. And the shuttle launch, too, maybe. Somewhere around there. So now, when we look at this, and listeners, if you got the email blast yesterday, you've got it in front of you, because you've got where you can click on the previous 36 hours in the induction magnetometer, and it's at Maestro. The website is maestro.harp, and then it goes on and on. It's quite lengthy, but you've got it if you got the email blast, which is why I encourage you to get the email blast. You can see that it stopped at about 6 o'clock this morning, or it reduced in its intensity. We'll be back after this 3-minute break with Larry. Thank you for joining us. This is Joyce Riley. We'll be back. 3-minute break. And Josh. I forgot. We got Josh here. Believe it or not. Does some things that, well, we're not quite sure what all it does, but we know that it...
And 6677. That's 800-217-66...
Doing something about it and preparing. And then you know what? Sometimes we learn things we don't want to know. Got to tell you that what Larry has to say in watching this induction magnetometer at HAARP, if you're not familiar with HAARP, great big machine up in Alaska that does some things that, well, we're not quite sure what all it does, but we know that it can give off a frequency that could create an earthquake. A lot of people are saying that's what happened in Japan. Now, let me just go back so we can set sort of some foundation here, Larry. there was enough of the pressure coming from, I don't know what else to call it, the blast, the low frequency coming from this HAARP prior to the time of the Japan earthquake, that there are many people that say that that could be the causative agent of the Japanese earthquake. Now, where was it on the, for instance, on this the scale that we've been looking at during the time of the Japanese earthquake?
Okay, from March 9th through March 11th for 55 hours, and there were two quakes. There was a 7.4 quake, and then the big one, which was a 9.1 they finally settled out at. And it was a 2.5 hertz. Again, to cause an earthquake, it's right around 2.2 to 2.5 hertz. That's the frequency, extremely low frequency, or what they call ultra-low frequency, which is miles. You know, if you were to see the wavelength, is miles long. It's a huge wavelength. And they're beaming this directly into the Earth. The epicenter of this was 10 kilometers deep. And again, HAARP, you know, the video I saw that was narrated by Martin Sheen, they said that when HAARP's turned on full, for an hour and a half, it was the equivalent energy of a hydrogen blast, similar to what took out Bikini Atoll. So they're using this. Here's the thing that your listeners need to do. You need to contact your friends and neighbors. Tell people, tell your family, tell everybody you know that this earthquake is coming. It is not going to be a natural event. That this weapon is being used against this country. It is not a natural event. You are being attacked. They are pre-positioning troops to move you from your homes after the attacks to the FEMA camps. This is depopulation. This country is armed. You need to defend yourselves when they go to do this. Now, the only good piece of news I can tell you is I talked to a guy about this scenario 3 years ago, and he discussed a prophecy that there would be a 9.0 style quake. A foreign army would come in and cover this land. There would be this massive earthquake, and then people would rise up and kick their butt. You know, so hopefully that's the way it'll go.
Well, I like to hear that. I like hearing that. Let me ask you, though, now going back to the Japanese earthquake, you said for 55 hours they were blasting it. At what level on this scale? It's a scale from 1 to 5. On the what level were they blasting?
2.5 hertz.
2.5.
2.5 hertz. Yeah, the scale that this shows is hertz, and it goes from 1 to 5 hertz, right in the middle, 2.5 hertz. For 55 hours. Again, when they did Haiti, it was 2.2 hertz for 40 hours. So what they're doing is they're focusing this beam. If you go to YouTube, plug in Chile and earthquake, and you'll see up in the sky this huge orange ring in the clouds, which is a visual effect from when the energy hits the clouds. You can also see, the clouds light up red over China when they did this. So the energy, when it hits the clouds, it lights up almost like an aurora borealis at night. Mm-hmm. In the daytime, you can see these orange-reddish clouds. That and the induction magnetometer are the only clues that we have that they're using these things.
Yes.
But it is not a natural event.
Okay, now.
Joyce, did you link the website, the White House news story on your webpage, perchance?
I believe so, yes. I believe so. Well, I'm not sure if it's on the news page. I think it's on the email blast, but I'll have one to do that at whitehouse.gov. It's called Understanding Earthquakes and Their Impacts, Part 1 from the Office of Science and Technology Policy. I want to ask you if I'm reading this correctly as to what they've been blasting it at when we get back so people can get an idea. If they were 2.5 now, listeners, let me tell you what I think it is, and I want to verify this with Larry after the break. Stay tuned. We've got a 1 minute, 10 second break. We'll be right back.